And,
Yeah, well, you got a lot of animals to feed and all
yeah,
that.
well, I get out. Said it, bus stop rejected for the morning time.
The check if they're getting,
He got a keyboard.
keyboard and strap.
I don't know if it's the keyboard or laptop, lady. I don't,
Yeah, it's probably just the keyboard.
I don't know which one it is. I don't know one of them things does.
So I was saying he had, showed some talent for it, so.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he got that one that games on there. When it comes on this TV,
Extra, yeah.
TV screen, you throw the thing at it, busted it all.
Oh, no.
And he's like, I'm gonna kill it. So they go a whole month. So
Oh, my.
every night we get him nothing.
Oh.
He takes care of
It was worse on y'all than it was on him, probably.
Carl, could you read please?
Where? Excuse me. Let's pray, please. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for this beautiful day. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for the privilege to have twice this day to be in your house with Christian friends. Lord, we ask you to be with our friends on the road, be with them and keep them safe. Lord, we thank you, answer prayers on our loved ones that are doing better. Lord, we ask you to forgive us when we've wronged anybody. We ask you, Heavenly Father, to go with us into our song leader and our service. Be with us and keep us safe. All things. Amen.
Amen.
Turn it back up again.
Please turn to page, number 131.
131.
31. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe am I. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Souls in danger, look above. Jesus completely saves. He will lift you by his love out of the angry waves. He is the master of the sea, billows his will obey. He, your Savior, wants to be saved today. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. If you would, please mark for invitation number 81. I'm sorry, number 61. 61.
61? Or 81?
61 or 81.
Okay.
61.
61. Well, you actually said both of them.
I'm sorry. Can't see, you can't walk. What did you say I had to do?
Nothing.
Can't hear you.
Don't listen. All right. So continue with Proverbs. There's a section that begins in chapter 4. Talks about one thing that can be applied to many other things. Let's look at it. In chapter 4, verse 1, hear my children the instruction of a father, and give attention to know understanding. For I give you good doctrine, do not forsake my law. When I was my father's son, tender and the only one beside my mother, he also taught me, and said to me, let your heart retain my words, keep my commands and live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget to turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will preserve you. Love her, and she will keep you. Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and all you're getting, get understanding. Now, Solomon is going to be very, very careful to give his sons this information and this advice. Do not forsake my law, because remember, the things that I got from my father David. And he's repeating those things. He says, these are the things that David said to me. And these are the things that he said to me, and I have followed them, at least up until this time. He's giving him the same advice that David gave him. In fact, remember what David said in 1 Chronicles 22, beginning with verse 11. Now, my son, may the Lord be with you, and may you prosper and build the house of the Lord your God, as he had said to you. Only may the Lord give you wisdom and understanding, and give you charge concerning Israel, that you may keep the law of the Lord your God. Then you will prosper, if you take care to fulfill all the statutes and judgments which the Lord charged Moses concerning Israel. Be strong and of good courage, do not fear nor be dismayed. And we can see some of the same advice in different words that he has given to these individuals who are his sons. Very closely, Paul is going to say in 2 Timothy 2 the very same thing. And the things you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these things to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. Now, this is advice that's given down throughout generations. And it began, Solomon says, with David, but even continues. The same advice is given from Paul to an individual he considers to be his own son, which is Timothy. Now, in Proverbs 4:23, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. Put away from you a deceitful mouth, and put perverse lips far from you. Let your eyes look straight ahead, and your eyelids look right before you. Ponder the path of your feet, and let all your ways be established. Do not turn to the right or the left. Remove your foot from evil. And later in Proverbs, he's going to say something very similar to 23 and verse 7. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. So the point he's making is when we gain control over our heart, we gain control over actions. Now, before I say anything else about that, let's look at how this is repeated. 2 Corinthians 10 and verse 5. Every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. And in Colossians 3 and verse 2, set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. And the same theme or the same idea is repeated again in the words of Jesus. In Matthew 12, verse 35, a good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth evil things. And in Mark 7, 21, 22, and 23, for from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a man. Now, the Jews fell into this trap as a lesson for us, but we fall into it today. Churches and religions, we seem to be putting things the wrong way. A lot of times, we look at the problems that adults have today, and we never see that the solution might be that we should teach our children. In the same way, we look at actions. And I've noticed all throughout the centuries, because it's kind of an interest of mine, how churches have hoped to deal with actions. I saw once a thing from out west. So far, the church rules and even rules to apply for a job in certain places. It had all kinds of things that men could not, say, frequent saloons, or men could not, I don't know why this was, but be shaved in a barber shop or something like that. You can't do this, you can't wear that, you can't wear the other, you can't wear your hair this way, you can't be seen in certain places. The problem with that is what we're dealing with is the outside. What we're dealing with is not the problem. We're dealing with a symptom of the problem. See, what I'm saying is this. There is a problem, and the problem is our heart is not right. Our thoughts are not right. There's where the actions come from. The secret to a better society, a secret to a better human being is the secret to a better society. And the secret to a better human being is not trying to control his or her actions. The secret to a better human being is trying to educate their hearts. It's trying to let them live. Live the right way, because everything that we think that's objectionable in this world does not come in and of itself. It comes from inside. This is what Jesus is saying. All your rules that you've made for people, that's not going to change the inside. That's not going to change the motivation. All that does is it changes how people act so that they can look more church-like, so that they can look more Christian-like. We don't need to do that. Years ago when I was in Kentucky, there was a group called the Old Regular Baptists. I don't mind saying them out loud because there isn't any anywhere else. If I were the Baptist church, I would sue those people to make them take their name Baptist out of their name. They're nothing like any Baptist I've ever met. But they had this rule, and people would tell me I would hear this, and I certainly did. They had this rule for women. They could not ever cut their hair. I have no idea why they had this rule. I think I do, but I'm not going to say that I do. Misunderstanding of scriptures, perhaps, or it just happened to be a tradition. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is here's what I saw, and here's what I heard. There was a lady who was a hairdresser that came to our church. And she said, I got so sick of it that almost every woman today was an old regular, and she came in and said, I want you to cut it, but make it look like they can't, make it look like so they can't see it. Make it look so they can't see it. The thing is, if that is, and I don't think it is, but if it is a legitimate action that needs to be done if you're Christ-like or a Christian or a member of the church, the problem is their heart wasn't in it. Their heart wasn't in that action. Their heart was not in that action. They didn't want to, they didn't want to do it, but they wanted to make it look like they did. Christians are like that all the time. I mean, church people are like that all the time. They want to do, and they want to, but they don't want people to know. They want to cover it up. See that in the church all the time. In fact, for one time, I'm sorry to say, I thought it was my job as a preacher to cover up a lot of those things. And I did it. And I'm ashamed to this day that I did it. I should not have. I shouldn't have had any part in exposing it because each person has to answer for themselves. But I shouldn't have been a part of covering it up. And we just don't have those things. We just don't put those things up. We just don't show those things to people. The problem is not that people are doing the wrong actions. The problem is that their hearts aren't right to begin with. Those actions wouldn't happen if people would let their hearts be right to begin with. And so that's when I changed what I do as a preacher. Now, this goes into a little bit different tack in verse 7 of Proverbs 5. But therefore, hear me now, my children, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Remove your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others, and your years the cruel one. Lest aliens be filled with your wealth, and your labors go to the house of a foreigner, and you mourn at last, when your flesh and your body are consumed, and say, how I have hated instruction, and my heart despised correction. I have not obeyed the voice of my teachers, nor inclined my ear to those who instructed me. I was on the verge of total ruin, in the midst of all the assembly and congregation. This is talking about adultery, and this is talking about an immoral woman. Temptation is avoided by what? Avoiding it, in this case. Now, why is he going to spend this much time on adultery, immoral women, and things like that? You got to remember who's saying this. It's Solomon. And we're going to, what is it? I never can get the numbers right. Solomon had 300 wives and 700 concubines, or 700 wives and 300 concubines. I know a preacher back in the woods that said Solomon had 300 wives and 700 cucumbers. He knew what concubines actually were. But Solomon was an individual who needed this advice. And also, he didn't stray far from his daddy. His daddy needed this advice. As much as respect as I have for David, he should have listened to this advice as well. This is the command against adultery. But look at what he says about adultery. And if you do, I think you can see that this applies to just about any other kind of evil that you can think of, any other kind of evil that is said. Proverbs 5 and verse 15. I got ahead of myself. Sorry about that. Also, if you get anywhere near sin, it's like a two-edged sword. Look at what he says. My son, pay attention to my wisdom, lend your ear to my understanding, that you may preserve discretion, your lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of an immoral woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. And in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps lay hold of hell. Lest you ponder her path of life, her ways are unstable, you do not know them. It looks, and this is true of any kind of wrongdoing, this is true of any kind of sinning. It's not ugly. It looks great at first. It looks like what you want to do. It looks so enticing. And you even explain it away by saying several things like everybody does it. And it doesn't seem to hurt anybody else. But this is what happens. It is in this case it's adultery, but in any case, it's a two-edged sword. Now, what Solomon picks is the most dangerous weapon there was in those days, was a two-edged sword. Because it was sharp on both sides. There was no way to grab hold of it without hurting yourself. There was no way to touch it without hurting yourself. If it was coming at you in battle, you were going to have to decide where you were going to take the damage so that you could get it away from the individual, because he was going to hurt you if you came within within reach of it. So you had to grab it, you had to do something with it. This is why the medieval knights, because of the two-edged broadsword, this is why they had those huge gauntlets of metal that I can't imagine how you would have any dexterity in other than swinging a sword or a mace or something. But this is why they had it, because they would have to grab that sword somehow and wrest it away from that guy. Therefore, hear me now, my children, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Remove your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others, and your years the cruel one. Lest aliens be filled with your wealth, your labors go to the house of the foreigner, and you mourn at last, when your flesh and your body are consumed, and say, how I have hated instruction, and my heart despised correction. I have not obeyed the voice of my teachers, nor inclined mine ear to those who instructed me. I was on the verge of total ruin in the midst of the assembly of the congregation. Stay away from such a immoral woman. Stay away from people like that. Stay away from temptation. Drink water from your own cistern, and running water from your own well. Should your fountain be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets, let them be only your own, and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice with your wife, with the wife of your youth. As a loving deer and a graceful doe, let her breast satisfy you at all times, and also be enraptured with her love. For why should you, my son, be enraptured by an immoral woman and be embraced in the arms of a seductress? For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all his past. His own iniquities entrap the wicked man, and he is caught in the cords of his sin. He shall die for lack of instruction, and the greatness of his folly he shall go astray. There is no way that you can hide these things. You certainly can't hide them from God. And you rarely can hide them from people. At least for very long. People will find out unless there are people who do as I try to do and don't always succeed. I don't even try to find out. It doesn't do any good. I used to. But I've since learned it's no use in me finding out. There's nothing I can do about it anyway. Now, God knows about it. Folks, if we try to get away with adultery or anything, and we fool everybody around us, we can never hide from God. David tried to hide this with his sin with Bathsheba. Solomon is also an individual who is going to try to hide the sins that he made. And you'd think both of them would have learned from their predecessor Saul. Saul, the first king, that's what he did. He tried to commit things and tried to hide them, not only from the prophet Samuel, but also from God. And it didn't ever work out. Those who continue to live for sin but will remain trapped by their sin, which will cause them to miss heaven. Folks, I read, and I won't name the leader David, a religious leader of our day. Everybody thought he was wonderful. As late as 4 years ago. Everybody thought he was wonderful until this year. He thought he was a great religious man and all this kind of stuff. He resigned from a very prestigious post this year because of all these extramarital affairs and these things and that things that he evidently has been doing for many, many years. It all came out. You can't hide it from God, and you really can't hide it from man for very long. It doesn't work. I'm not criticizing. I'm not judging. I'm just saying this is what happened this week, and this is what somebody tried to do. They tried to hide. And I guess we could use ourselves as an example, too, because we've all done it. We've tried to sin and hide it from other people, and even tried at times to hide it from God. My son, if you become surety for your friend, if you have shaken hands and pledged for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself, plead with your friend. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. He is warning his sons of being a surety. Today we would call that a cosigner for somebody else. You would pledge someone else, or you would pledge your goods, or your reputation, or your honor for someone else's. Be careful of that, he said. And again, I'm sure Solomon has gotten burned with that in the past. I know David has. There's actually evidence in the scriptures of him getting burned by that, and Saul. So be careful being a cosigner. Be careful pledging for someone else. He then teaches his son not to be lazy in verses 6 through 11. He describes a wicked man in verses 12 through 15. And in verses 16 through 19, I'm not going to spend a great time on this because we've actually had several sermons on this here, and it's very negative. But understand that there are 6 things which the Lord hates, yea, 7, or yes, 7 which are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. A heart that devises wicked plans, which is what we've been talking about this whole time in Proverbs. Feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers. The only thing that I want to say about that, about all of these things, is if you'll look, he says there are 6 things the Lord hates. Then he says, well, I'm going to add the word abomination. There are 7 things that are an abomination to God. Look at what the 7th one is. That he sees fit to say, well, here's 6. No, 7. But then I'm going to change the word from Lord hates to abomination. He that spreads strife among brothers. To me, that is the absolute worst thing a member of the church can do. There is an old saying or an old sign that you used to see. I don't think you see it anymore, but you should. In national parks that we created under the, I can't remember which president actually did it, but Teddy Roosevelt was the one that came up with the idea. And a guy by the name of John Audubon, oddly enough, formed the Audubon Society about birds, about wild birds. They came up with it. There's another president signed into law that these national parks, as beautiful and pristine, it says, there was a sign that said, let no one say, and say to your shame, that all was beauty here before you came. I would say the same thing about the church. This was, and folks, I've heard this over and over and over again. Churches say, well, we had a beautiful place here. People loved it. We did a lot of good work. And then so-and-so came, or this family came, or these couple of groups came and tore it all apart. First of all, there's two problems there. The one problem is people should not be what the seventh thing is, this abomination. They shouldn't strive to create division. They shouldn't strive to create strife. But congregation should not allow people to do that either. People say, well, you can't stop what people say. No, but you can stop listening to them. You can stop listening to them. And I hate to say this, but from what people come in, I don't ever go to church anywhere else as well. But from what people say when they come here, they say this goes on a lot in what's called churches around here. That there is strife, there is problems, there is arguing, and folks, I've seen it in the Lord's church, and they're going to see it again. All right. Proverbs 6 and verse 20. My son, keep your father's command, and do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. When you awake, they will speak with you. For the commandment is a lamp, and a law a light. Reproofs of instruction of the way of life. To keep you from the evil woman, from the flattering tongue of its seductors. Do not lust after her beauty in your heart, nor let her allure you with her eyelids. For by means of a harlot, a man is reduced to a crust of bread, and an adulteress to prey upon his precious life. Again, he goes into the sin of adultery, but he does say, keep your father's command, and do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart. Tie them around your neck. Take them with you. To me, even though that is a very, very base description, that's sort of description of a parent, or an elderly, or an elder person in a person's life. I see this as my job with children in church. I see this as a job with my grandchildren. I see this as a job with the kids I teach at school. But you have to understand that sometimes children will take this wisdom and will leave it behind. He is pleading with them, listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. I've paid for the knowledge that I have. You tie them around your neck. You bind them up continually upon your heart. You take these commands and you take this instruction with you. Make sure that you stick with it. Make sure that you go with it. Make sure you take these commands with you. Don't throw it away. Take it with you all throughout your life, because there comes a point in a child's life where that parent is not going to have the ability to instruct anymore unless the child allows them. Unless the child allows them to do it. Do you know how many times that I've spoken to parents who are just absolutely heartbroken? And they'll tell me something that their child has done. And they'll say, Brother Joe, I assure you, they were not raised this way. This is not the way they were raised. They didn't have to tell me that. I knew they weren't raised that way. Sometimes we take instruction and we throw it away. We don't put it where we should. We don't treasure it as we should. Until, hopefully, down the road, they look and say, you know, the advice I was given, it was right. I've made amends. Now, here's another thing. Can a man take fire to his bosom? Oh, that's what I just read. Sorry about that. I didn't know it had changed. Can a man take fire to his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be seared? So is he who goes to his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her shall not be innocent. So if a person commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, he is going to get burned. The principle applies to other things as well. One of the preachers that we had, I never saw this, I was away in college, but mom and dad told me about it. I would never do this. But he illustrated our idea towards sin. This is not, by the way, this is only a representation, a very small replica of what we're talking about. And I think that this apparatus is now illegal. I know it is in Georgia, but I'm not sure where it is anywhere else. It's a very cruel thing. But what he did was he took a bear trap. It's about so big around, I believe. And he set it on the pulpit and set the thing. And then he said, if that is sin, here is our attitude towards sin. He would touch it. He would put his hands all around. I would never do this, but I'm scared to death of a bear trap. But and he put his hands all around it. Mom said when he watched, she said, I was so scared that he would spring that trap and we'd have to call the ambulance, because his hand got ripped off or something like that. But that's what he did. He later, I don't know how he got rid of it. He threw it on the floor or something, got rid of it, but and I did it. He said, this is our attitude towards sin. Even though I would never do that, I will describe it to you because he is entirely right. People today, church people today, and this has been true my entire career, that's our attitude towards sin. We don't resist the devil and he will flee from us. We don't avoid temptation, we head right into it. And we see just how close we can get to sin, without sinning. And church people are like that. We say, well, I'll take this step. Well, that's okay. And I'll take this step. And that's okay. And we'll get just as close as we possibly can without sinning, we think. That's not the way the Bible teaches. That's not what it teaches us at all. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Don't go anywhere near it. Don't go anywhere near sin. Resist it. Go away from it. Leave it alone. Don't have anything to do with it. If it's temptation, recognize the temptation and avoid it if it is at all possible. Proverbs 6 and verse 30. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he is starving. Yet when he is found, he must restore sevenfold. He may have to give up all the substance of his house. Folks, a lot of times people will steal to support their family. When he's caught, people feel sorry for him. But what he did was still wrong. And he will have to restore this law of Moses, by the way. If you steal, you have to restore what you stole sevenfold. 7 times what you stole, you have to return it. Now, therefore, listen to me, my children. Pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For she has cast down many wounded, and all who were slain by her were strong men. Her house is the way to hell, ascending to the chambers of death. Outside the house of sin, you can see. You can see this by looking at the house of sin. Turn on your televisions, watch the news. Outside of the house of sin, you're going to see the victims. You're going to all be out there. This is the one string. I've got to teach it here in a couple days. The story of Jason. I'm sorry, the story of Perseus. Perseus was a Greek hero. And he had to go and kill the Medusa. The Medusa in the Greek mythology is the lady with the body of a serpent, torso of a woman, and a face that's so ugly, and her hair is full of snakes. If she's so ugly that if you look at her, you turn to stone. supposedly she offended one of the gods, I think it was Hera, by saying she was more beautiful than the gods, than the goddess. And that's how she was cursed. That's another point of the story. Perseus, and he's successful, but I don't think I would have been. Because as Perseus is going up to the cavern of the Medusa, you know what he sees? All kinds of men who have gone before him turned to stone. He sees the victim. He sees the victims of the Medusa all the way up there. I think I would figure out, there's got to be another way than this to accomplish my goals. There's got to be another way than this. People who stray into or go into or run headlong into sin have to go by all the victims that have gone before of that sin. Be careful, because you are not the first. You will not be the first to be successful at taming sin, because it's impossible to do. If you go into sinning, it's always going to bring about its own horrible reward. That's just the way sinning is. That's just the way sin is, just the very nature of it. If for any reason you stand in need to respond to the Lord's invitation, will you come? Together we stand.
There's within my heart a melody. Jesus whispers sweet and low. Fear not, I am with thee, peace be still. In all of thy ebb and flow. Jesus, 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 sweetest name I know, fills my every longing, keeps me singing as I go.
Barry, would you dismiss us, please?
Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to worship you. Praise God. That you bless this congregation and all the time here. Keep it safe for the next 40 times.
Amen. Not many announcements. Next week we will have maybe our meeting. Not entirely quite sure we will. Don and I would like to try to get them to get away next weekend. So Joe may be doing the preaching, or I may leave a PowerPoint on the computer to play while we're gone. So I don't know if our meetings next week or not. The same thing exists. We still need to put a gutter up there. We still need to put the solar panels up. We need to change these lights. So that they haven't. We had a work day scheduled, and Steve got really bad in Delaware, so they had to run up to see him. They were back last weekend, but they had problems at home they had to deal with. So things just happen. I think right now our priority is like just getting awfully dark. Seems like every week one more goes out. Remember Donna, she's having horrible stomach problems, as am I. I'm not sure what mine are caused by. The kids, luckily now with the kids are in class wearing masks, and we are wearing masks, but there are a few kids, about a third of the kids that we have in each class, who are home. So I'm sort of stuck behind the desk because I can't write on the board anymore because the kids can't see it at home. So I have a document camera that I go in around the board, and I go a lot through PowerPoint and stuff like this, like I do here. It's different. I did hear Superintendent Woods, the state superintendent of school, say that in case we have to go to all virtual, the state of Georgia. So they're already considering evidently that. The way it's going to be set up in Bryan County is I will probably go to school every day, teach kids, and take roll on Google Meet on the platform, but at least the spreading of the disease won't be as bad. Georgia is, correct me if I'm wrong, because Georgia is kind of leveling out on the number of cases they're having every day. Hopefully it will start going down pretty soon. Last time we started leveling out, we started opening up everything and it all went back up again. So I don't think there's a science behind this. I'm not sure there's a mathematical equation to what happens. I heard a guy say on television not too terribly long ago, he said, all this social distancing and stuff, you're really not stopping so much completely the spread of the virus. What you're doing is you're giving the first responders and the hospital room to work. You're slowing it down enough so that they can have the equipment and the time to regroup and have enough ventilators, have enough equipment. So that's pretty smart. And if that way they can help everybody that gets the virus. Vaccine is kind of in the works, and some sort of new treatment is being kind of fast tracked by the FDA. So I don't know what's going on with the virus. I'll be honest with you. I do not watch the news all that much. It seems that the news talks about is virus, racial unrest, and now how horrible both presidential candidates are. I am looking forward to the election. And the reason I'm looking forward to the election is so all of these horrible ads will go off the air. I've seen them all. I've seen them all over and over. I know how much of a scumbag every candidate running for office is right now, but they've all been called scumbags on my television. Our problem in Georgia, though, is we have a special election that if it goes to runoff, the final election will be in January. So the Senate seat held currently by Kelly Loeffler is going to a special election in November, the same time as all the other elections. But if no one, and there's a dozen people running for it, if no one gets 50% of the vote, then it goes to a runoff election in January. So guess what we're going to hear in Georgia until January. I had to look into it for my class because I was wondering why Kelly Loeffler was saying that Doug Collins was such a scumbag, and Doug Collins wasn't saying anything. Well, I found out why. He's waiting to see if he comes in, and then he's going to spend all this money. Then she's spending all her money. So, personally, I don't care which one wins or who wins. Anything we can talk about other than that?
Remember Donna Murphy, please,
Yeah.
and my aunt Linda.
Yeah. There's just a lot of things, bad things going on right now. A lot of people's hearts and minds in their lives. And Donna and I both have this stomach problem. I'm not sure what it is. I've got a doctor appointment this month. She's got several. So be mindful of all of us. If you will. Is there anything else we can talk about? Seems like there was. But I can't remember. If not, then we shall see you Wednesday night at 7, if not before.
Night, little lady.
Good night.
Night, Brad.
Bye, Bob. You want me to do that? Thank you.
Thank you, though. Thank you.
Hang in there, Donna, you don't have to.
Yep. Working in slow motion.
I hope I do feel better, because I'm on